Karoline Leavitt stepped into the showroom, inquiring about the luxurious azure coupe. The salesman, Blake Thompson, glanced her up and down with a sneer, chuckling as he pointed toward the exit. "This isn't the place for MAGA folks like you," he said. Karoline, briefly angered, left with a resolute look. The next morning, a fiery red Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in front of the showroom. As the back door opened, Blake froze, his eyes widening in shock. He never expected this to happen. Nicholas Rio, Karoline's husband, stepped out, ready to confront him. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Karoline Leavitt, 27, the youngest White House press secretary in history under the Trump administration, walked into Capital Luxury Motors dealership in Washington, D.C. after a grueling day at the White House. She wore a white button-up shirt, black dress pants, and low heels, polished, professional, yet casual in her own style. Around her neck, a subtle MAGA necklace quietly signaled her conservative stance. Karoline needed a new car, the Azure Coupe, as her work vehicle. It wasn't just for getting between press briefings. It was a bold statement against the left-wing media that constantly criticized her and the president. This upscale dealership sat in the heart of D.C., catering to the political elite with gleaming Porsches, Bentleys and Ferraris behind glass. But beneath the glitz was a staff of liberal-leaning management with little love for the MAGA crowd. Karoline strode through the glass doors, her gaze confident, phone in hand. Pushing open the entrance to Capital Luxury Motors, a small chime sounded as she stepped inside. The vast space sparkled under LED lights, illuminating luxury cars, a fiery red Porsche 911 Turbo, a glossy black Bentley Continental, and a blazing yellow Ferrari SF90 on a display pedestal. The air carried hints of new leather and expensive cologne. She scanned the showroom, her eyes settling on the Azure Coupe, a midnight blue masterpiece with sharp lines, priced at $285,000. It was exactly what she needed, a car both powerful and refined enough to take her from the White House to press briefings. "Hello, ma'am. How can I assist you?" A young voice piped up. Daniel, a new employee around 25, wearing a slightly oversized suit, approached with a timid smile. "I'd like to see that Azure Coupe," Karoline replied, her tone calm but firm, pointing at the car. Daniel nodded, starting to say, "It's got a V8 engine, hand-stitched leather interior, perfect for—" But before he could finish, a figure interrupted. "I'll take it from here, Daniel." Blake Thompson, the sales manager, appeared. Around 40, tall and broad, he wore an expensive gray suit, his slicked-back hair gleaming. His eyes radiated smugness, a staunch liberal. Blake adjusted his tie, sizing Karoline up from head to toe, not with curiosity but judgment. "Hello," he said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I'm Blake Thompson, manager here. What are you looking for?" "I want to see the Azure Coupe," Karoline repeated, ignoring his stare. Blake smirked, stepping between her and the car. "You sure? This is a limited edition. Not just anyone can buy it." His tone carried a hint of mockery. Karoline frowned slightly. "I know what it is. I want to see the interior." Blake crossed his arms, scoffing. "You look familiar. Hold on." He tilted his head, then his eyes lit up as if he'd pieced it together. "Oh, I remember now. You're Karoline Leavitt, right? Trump's press secretary." He emphasized Trump like it was a curse, his voice rising, drawing glances from nearby customers. Karoline nodded, her expression unchanged. "That's right. I need this car for work." Blake laughed, the harsh sound echoing through the showroom. "Work? You mean running to press briefings to defend outdated policies? I thought you were just good at talking tariffs and border walls, didn't peg you for dreaming of luxury cars." He turned to Daniel, winking. "Hear that? MAGA knows how to play fancy too." Daniel lowered his head, visibly uneasy but silent. Karoline, stood tall, her voice still steady. "I'm not dreaming. I want to buy it today. Can you show me the car?" Blake stopped laughing, but the smirk lingered. He stepped closer, leaning down as if talking to a child. "Listen, Miss Leavitt, I don't know where you get your money. Probably MAGA donations, right? But this is Capital Luxury Motors. We serve clients with taste, with social awareness, not showy conservatives." "Social awareness," Karoline echoed, her tone sharpening slightly. "You mean refusing customers based on politics? I need a car to do my job efficiently, not to please you or anyone else." Blake shrugged, unfazed. "Efficiently with Trump. I don't think this car fits your image. What are you going to do? Polish his brand with it?" Karoline clenched her fists, but maintained her trademark calm from facing down leftist reporters. "You don't need to care what I use it for. I'm a customer, I have money, and I want to see the car. That's it." Blake stepped back, eyeing her like she'd said something absurd. "Money? You're serious? Coming in here with that outfit and that cheap necklace? Who do you think you are to demand an azure coupe?" Whispers spread. A couple near the Ferrari turned to look. Two other salespeople murmured, one chuckling. Daniel stood still, eyes on the floor, clearly wishing to vanish. Blake crossed his arms, his gaze daring her. "Look, Miss Leavitt, I don't have time for MAGA stunts. If you want a car, book an appointment like a normal person. Otherwise, I suggest you try somewhere else. Tesla, maybe. Better for the environment." Karoline met his eyes, her voice low but firm. "I don't need your suggestions. I want this car." Blake Thompson stood before Karoline Leavitt, his gaze icy, arms crossed tightly as if guarding his turf in the Capital Luxury Motors showroom. Whispers from customers and staff rippled through, blending with the soft background music from ceiling speakers. The midnight blue azure coupe still gleamed silently on its pedestal, but the air around it now felt heavy. "Don't you get it? This is my turf, and I say no," Blake repeated, his voice dropping, no longer hiding his contempt. Karoline, in her white shirt and black pants, stood firm, unshaken. Her eyes were as sharp as when she faced leftist reporters at the White House. "Your turf?" she replied, her tone calm but weighty, honed from sparring on national TV. "I thought this was a dealership, not a political club. I have money. I want to buy the azure coupe. What's your reason for refusing me?" Blake gave a short, dry laugh, the sound sharp like a slap. "Reason? You're seriously asking that? Look at you, that cheap MAGA necklace, that attitude like you own the world. You're Trump's people, and we don't welcome your kind here." Karoline furrowed her brow but stayed composed. "My money's as good as anyone's in this showroom. You can't refuse me just because you don't like Trump." Blake stepped closer, leaning down until his face was level with hers, his breath tinged with bitter coffee. "Oh, I can, Miss Leavitt. This is a private business. I decide who gets served, and I don't want dirty MAGA money tainting this place." The whispers in the showroom grew louder. A middle-aged man in a blue suit near the Bentley murmured to his wife, "Who is she?" His wife replied, "Trump's press secretary. I've seen her on TV." Another salesperson with dyed blonde hair giggled, whispering to a colleague, "Blake's teaching her a lesson." Daniel, the young employee, stood a few steps away, clutching a brochure, his face flushed with embarrassment, but too afraid to intervene. Karoline took a deep breath, her voice hardening. "Dirty money? You're talking about what I earn from my job, representing millions of Americans. By not serving me, you're insulting them." Blake shrugged, turning to the small crowd gathering. "Listen up, everyone," he boomed, his voice carrying across the showroom like an actor on stage. "Miss Leavitt here wants to use MAGA money to buy our cars. I bet she'd slap a Trump flag on it and parade around D.C. Do we need customers like that?" A few laughs erupted from the corner. The man near the Bentley nodded. His wife covered her mouth as she giggled, but not everyone agreed. An older woman in a grey sweater frowned. "She just wants to buy a car. What's wrong with that?" Blake ignored. her turning back to Caroline, pointing at the glass doors. "You heard them. This isn't your place. I don't care if you're press secretary or whatever. Get out now." Caroline didn't budge. "I'm a customer, not a troublemaker. You have no legal grounds to kick me out." Blake stepped closer, so near she could see the creases on his forehead. "Grounds? I don't like you, that's enough. This is my turf, and I say you don't belong. Leave, or I'll call security." He pointed harder at the door, his voice rising, brimming. With defiance, the crowd fell silent, all eyes on Caroline. She looked at Blake, then around the showroom. Curious faces, some smirking, others uneasy. She knew she could call a lawyer, turn this into a lawsuit. But not now. "Fine," she said, her voice low but clear, ringing like a warning. "You want me gone? I'll go, but this isn't over." She turned, heading for the glass doors, her heels clicking steadily on the marble floor. Blake laughed loudly behind her. "Say hi to Trump for me. Get an electric car, it's more modern." A few more laughs followed, but Daniel bowed his head, muttering, "This isn't right." As Caroline pushed the door, sunlight streamed in, highlighting her small but steadfast silhouette. Her hand gripped her phone, lips pressed into a tight line. Blake thought he'd won, that he'd just schooled the mega crowd. But he didn't know Caroline wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving with a plan. The glass door shut behind her, the small chime ringing again like a period on the drama that had just unfolded. But it wasn't the end. The showroom buzzed with whispers. Blake strutted back to his work. Karoline Leavitt pushed open the door of her old sedan, a silver Toyota Camry with faded paint, and slid into the driver's seat. The late afternoon sun dimmed outside Capital Luxury Motors, but inside her, a quiet fire smoldered. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed through the windshield, still hearing Blake Thompson's mocking laugh. "Get an electric car. It's more modern." She took a deep breath, pulled her phone from her black dress pants, opened her contacts, and dialed. The line rang twice before a deep, slightly raspy voice answered. "Caroline, you okay?" "Nicholas," she said, her voice low but steady. "I just got kicked out of a dealership in D.C." On the end, Nicholas Rio, her husband, went quiet for a second. She pictured him in his home office, salt and pepper hair, slightly mussed, dark, brown eyes narrowing. Nicholas, 59, once homeless before building Rio Enterprises LLC into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire in New England, wasn't quick to anger. But when it came to Caroline, he reacted fiercely. "Kicked out? Who dared? Do that to you?" he asked, his voice dropping, edged with fury. Caroline started the car, the engine humming faintly as she pulled out of the lot. "The manager, Blake Thompson. He recognized me as Trump's press secretary, refused to sell me a car because I'm meager, called my money dirty, said I didn't belong there." She recounted it, her tone calm but tinged with frustration. "I wanted the Azure coupe for work, to get between the White House and briefings, to do my job, but he humiliated me in front of the whole showroom." Nicholas exhaled sharply through the phone, the sound like wind rushing through the receiver. "What did he say?" Caroline repeated Blake's words, from the jabs about Trump to the final challenge, "Get out or I'll call security." She stopped at a red light, fingers tapping the wheel. I pushed back, said my money's as good as anyone's, but he didn't care. He used private business rights to kick me out, mocked the president too. "Bastard," Nicholas muttered, his voice now unmistakably angry. Caroline heard the creak of a leather chair. He'd probably stood up, pacing their suburban D.C. home office. She smiled faintly, knowing her husband well. Nicholas wasn't just a successful real estate mogul. He'd clawed his way up from nothing, sleeping on park benches in Hampton Beach before owning millions in property. He'd proposed to her just months after their son, Nico Robert, was born, and he'd sworn to protect his family at all costs. "Who does he think he is, insulting you like that?" Nicholas said, his voice rising. You're the White House press secretary representing the president, and he calls your money dirty. Does he know how hard you work? Karoline merged onto the highway, city lights flickering in the distance. He doesn't care, Nicholas. To him, I'm everything he hates. Trump, MAGA, all of it. He wanted to humiliate me, to prove he's superior. Nicholas went quiet for a moment, then asked, "What do you want me to do?" Karoline pursed her lips, weighing her options. She could turn it into a lawsuit, feed it to conservative media, or let it go. But she wasn't the type to let go. "I don't want revenge," she said slowly, "but I want him to see his mistake. He thinks I'm weak because I'm a young woman, a Trump supporter. I want him to realize his liberalism doesn't give him the right to trample people." Nicholas chuckled, a low, meaningful sound. "All right, I know what to do." Karoline frowned. "What do you mean? Just head home?" He replied, his tone firm, "Tomorrow I'll go there. He won't forget that day." Karoline heard him walking, maybe to the garage, where the Rolls-Royce Phantom, worth $1.5 million, a deep red reminiscent of MAGA, sat waiting. "Nicholas, don't overdo it," she warned, though she knew he rarely listened when riled up. "Overdo it," he repeated, his tone tinged with mischief. "I just want to show him how wrong he was to mess with my wife. You're Karoline Leavitt. No one gets to disrespect you." Karoline let out a soft laugh, her first since leaving the dealership. "All right, but I want to hear all the details later." "Don't worry," Nicholas said. "I'll tell you everything. Now go home. Nico is waiting for you." Karoline Leavitt drove her old silver Toyota Camry home, its headlights sweeping across D.C.'s suburban streets. The faint hum of the engine mixed with her thoughts about the call with Nicholas Rio, her husband. "Tomorrow I'll go there. He won't forget that day," he'd said, his voice brimming with resolve. Karoline smiled faintly, her hand brushing the MAGA necklace, though she still weighed her feelings. Blake Thompson had humiliated her in front of the entire Capital Luxury Motors showroom, not just because she was Trump's press secretary, but because he thought she didn't belong. Nicholas wanted to strike back, and she knew he wasn't kidding. She turned onto the road leading to their two-story suburban home, a discreet villa, far less flashy than the multi-million-dollar properties Nicholas owned in New Hampshire. As the car parked in the garage, the living room light glowed through the curtains. Karoline stepped inside, kicked off her heels, and saw Nicholas sitting in a leather chair in the small office, a glass of whiskey in hand, eyes glued to his phone. He wore a simple grey shirt, his salt and pepper hair slightly mussed, signs of a day working on Rio Enterprises LLC. Scattered blueprints of real estate projects littered the desk, but he looked up the moment he heard her. "You're back," Nicholas said, standing, his deep brown eyes flashing with concern, mixed with anger. Tall and broad at 59, he still carried the rugged frame from his struggling days in Hampton Beach. "Nico's asleep upstairs. You okay?" Karoline nodded, sinking into the sofa across from him. "I'm fine, but I'm still thinking about the dealership. Blake didn't just refuse to sell me a car. He wanted to humiliate me, to prove his liberal ideals were superior." Nicholas gripped his glass tighter, his knuckles whitening. "He thinks he's nobler than you just because he hates Trump." He set the glass on the table, his voice dropping. "I'm not letting this slide easily." Karoline tilted her head. "I told you, I don't want revenge. I want him to see his mistake, not be ruined." Nicholas chuckled. That familiar, mischievous smile she'd known since he proposed in New Hampshire. "I'm not buying the dealership to fire him, though I could, but I'll make him remember tomorrow." He stepped to the office door, waving her to follow. "Come here. I'll show you what I'm using." Karoline stood, trailing him through the dim hallway to the spacious garage out back. The garage lights flicked on, revealing the Rolls-Royce Phantom, a $1.5 million beast, painted a deep red reminiscent of the MAGA flag, with bespoke beige leather interior and gleaming chrome wheels. Nicholas patted the hood, his voice proud. I had it custom-made last year after Nico was born. Tomorrow I'm driving it to Capital Luxury Motors. He'll see what he rejected isn't a joke. Karoline eyed the car, then her husband, a flicker of worry in her gaze. Nicholas, what are you planning? Don't turn this into a flex. He shook his head, stepping closer and placing a hand on her shoulder. Not a flex. I'll go there by the azure coupe you wanted and let him know he was wrong to disrespect you. He thinks you don't belong in his world. I'll show him where beyond his little bubble. Karoline pressed her lips together, thinking, but if you just buy the car, he'll think he won, that our money doesn't change his mindset. Nicholas smirked, a spark lighting his eyes. Not just the car. I'll invite him to a MAGA event, the Veterans Fundraiser Gala you're hosting next month. He'll have to face the people he despises, see their real worth. That's how I'll teach him, not with fists. Karoline laughed, feeling lighter for the first time that day. You're smarter than I give you credit for. I have to be to keep up. With you, Nicholas replied, pulling her into his arms. He lowered his voice. He messed with the wrong person, Karoline. I had nothing once, slept on park benches, but I learned a person's worth isn't their looks or beliefs. He needs to learn that, and I'll be the one to teach him. She nodded, leaning into him for a moment, then asked, You sure? Absolutely, he said, letting her go and stepping to open the car door. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll be there. You don't need to come, let me handle it. But you'll love hearing how it goes. Karoline looked at him, then at the blazing red car under the garage. Lights. All right, I want the full details. Nicholas nodded, his smile returning. Bright morning sunlight poured over Washington, D.C., glinting off the glass walls of Capital Luxury Motors. A deep, powerful rumble echoed as the deep red Rolls-Royce Phantom, worth $1.5 million, rolled. Slowly up to the dealership's entrance, a small crowd gathered near the door, some holding phones to record, whispering, "What a car! Must be someone big." Inside the showroom, Blake Thompson stood by the Bentley Continental, adjusting his grey tie, chatting with a wealthy client. Still smug from kicking Karoline Leavitt out yesterday, he thought he'd taught the MAGA crowd a lesson. The Rolls-Royce. Door opened and Nicholas Rio stepped out. At 59, tall and imposing, he wore a fitted dark grey suit, his salt and pepper hair neat, his sharp gaze that of a man who'd built a real estate empire from nothing. The fiery red car behind him wasn't just transport. It was a statement echoing the MAGA flag he and Karoline cherished.
By 5 p.m., a Channel 7 news reporter stood outside the courthouse, filming live. Today, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was fined $500 for wearing a cross in court. She fought back, and now the city's buzzing. On X, cross in court soared past 100,000 mentions. People shared their own Hargrove stories. He fined me $200 for a prayer badge last year. I saw him scold a mom for a cross in a divorce case. A big account posted a short video someone secretly filmed in court, Karoline holding up her White House card, her voice ringing out strong. The clip went viral, hitting 1 million views in hours. Karoline sat in her car, parked on a quiet street corner watching the news explode. She called her husband, a low-key businessman, her voice calm but excited. "Honey, I just shut down a judge. This is about to get huge." He laughed over the phone. "You always pull off crazy stuff. Stay safe." She nodded, hung up, and opened an email from Trump's office. "Prep for a press conference tonight. We're turning this into a win." At home, Hargrove turned on the TV, seeing his face on the evening news. Judge faces backlash after fining press secretary. Nuttery. The bold headline flashed. He switched it off, hands shaking. The Judicial Council had called, demanding he explain himself. By morning, he knew. His 30-year career was teetering, all because of a 27-year-old and her tiny cross. The next morning, the D.C. Judicial Council's office buzzed like a beehive. News of Karoline Leavitt and Judge Charles Hargrove had swept through Washington, forcing the council to launch an urgent investigation. Linda Martinez, a seasoned investigator with 20 years' experience, stood before a long table spreading out dozens of case files from Hargrove's court. Her team had been working non-stop since 6 a.m. after receiving an official complaint from the White House office, filed by Karoline last night. "We've got 48 hours to report," Linda told, her team, her voice firm. "Find everything tied to Hargrove and religious symbols." Karoline, meanwhile, sat in her White House office, prepping for tonight's press conference at Trump's command. She reviewed the courtroom recording, sending another email to his advisor. "I've got data from X, hundreds accusing Hargrove of bias. Push this hard." Her phone buzzed constantly, messages from lawyers, reporters, and supporters. A law student wrote, "You inspire me. Hargrove fined my mom for a cross once." Karoline smiled, knowing this was no longer just her fight. It had reached thousands. At the courthouse, Mrs. Thompson entered the investigation room, clutching her small notebook. "I've tracked 12 years with Hargrove," she told Linda, her voice shaky but resolute. "He always targeted religious symbols, crosses, hijabs, anything standout. But crude shirts or loud jewelry, he let them slide." Linda flipped through the notebook, spotting dozens of cases. September 14, 2024. Man with cross. Fined. $300 for disruption. October 20th, 2024. Muslim woman with hijab. Fined $200 for inappropriateness. Linda frowned. "This is gold. Thank you, Chakri." James Wilson showed up too, offering a handwritten statement. "I've been a bailiff there 15 years, he said. "Hargrove fined people with religious symbols 3 times more than other violations. I counted, once in a day, he hit 5 people for crosses but ignored 3 in vulgar shirts. Theoi." Linda jotted notes fast, her team cross-checking with official records. The data soon emerged. Over the past year, 70% of religious symbol fines targeted Christians, averaging 200, double the penalty for other dress code breaches. Charles Hargrove, meanwhile, sat in his home office, facing the council via Zoom. "I didn't mean to be biased," he said, his voice weak, hands cradling his head. Linda presented the data. "Mr. Hargrove, records show you fined people wearing crosses 80% more harshly than similar violations. How do you explain that?" Hargrove fell silent, eyes downcast. He recalled Karoline, her steely voice, her sharp reasoning about the First Amendment. "I didn't realize," he mumbled. "I thought I was maintaining order." By noon, Linda's preliminary report was complete. "This isn't just Hargrove," she told the council. "No. We found 3 other D.C. judges with similar tendencies, though milder. But Hargrove is the clearest case: bias against religion, especially Christianity." The council ordered Hargrove's immediate suspension, pending a final ruling. News leaked out, and X erupted again. Cross in court, Hargrove suspended. Karoline Leavitt shakes the system. A conservative account posted, "Trump's legal genius wins again. Odium." Karoline stood before the mirror in the White House briefing room at 6 p.m., adjusting her blazer, the cross still gleaming. Trump walked in, clapping her shoulder. "You made me proud, Karoline. Tonight we show them religious freedom is untouchable." She nodded, stepping to the podium, camera flashes firing non-stop. Yesterday, I was fined for wearing a cross. Not because I was wrong, but because a judge thought he was above the law, she said, her voice resonating. I fought back, not just for me, but for everyone treated unfairly for their faith. The press crowd buzzed, questions flying, but she answered calmly, citing law and X data. Hargrove watched the briefing on TV, hands trembling. He turned it off, sitting in darkness. His phone overflowed with messages, colleagues distancing themselves, reporters hounding him. But what shocked him most was Thompson and Wilson's testimony, people he trusted. He opened his laptop, searching the Church of Lukumi Babalu Aye, ruling Karoline mentioned. Reading it, he sighed. She's right. I was wrong. For the first time in 30 years, Hargrove felt small. He called the council, voice hoarse. I'm resigning, but I want to help fix this. The next day, Hargrove appeared at a small council meeting, no longer in a judge's robe. I didn't see my own bias, he said, eyes red. Karoline Leavitt opened my eyes. I want to join the training, so no one repeats my mistakes. Linda nodded, noting Hargrove's turning around could be useful. The news spread, sparking debate. Some on X mocked, Hargrove's faking it, but others supported. At least he admits fault. Rare. Karoline, back in her office, got an email from Linda. Hargrove resigned, agreed to train. You changed. Him. She glanced at the cross in the mirror, smiling. The case she'd come to observe, the Christian group suing the government, was now just a small part of a bigger story. She'd turned an ordinary day into a spark for change, not just for Hargrove, but for the whole system. Just 4 days after the incident. At the D.C. local court, the atmosphere in Washington shifted noticeably. Karoline Leavitt stood in her White House office, gazing out the window at Pennsylvania Avenue. The silver cross on her navy blazer collar still shone, now a symbol of a movement bigger than she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed with messages from Trump, conservatives, and everyday people thanking her for speaking up. An email from the D.C. Judicial Council had just arrived. New regulations drafted. Thank you, Miss Leavitt. She smiled, knowing this victory wasn't hers alone. After the lightning-fast investigation, the council issued new rules for D.C. courts. No bans on religious symbols unless they genuinely disrupt. All staff, from judges to clerks, must undergo mandatory First Amendment training. Linda Martinez, the lead investigator, stood before the council, stating, "The Hargrove case shows we need more transparency. Training is the first step." Yenshol. A new plaque went up outside the courthouse inscribed, "Religious freedom, a right beyond violation." Karoline saw the news on X, where Cross in Court still trended. D.C. changes laws, thanks to Karoline Leavitt. Charles Hargrove, no longer a judge, appeared at the first training session. He stood before dozens of court staff, voice raspy but sincere. I thought I was fair, but I was wrong. Karoline Leavitt taught me to look at myself. Don't let bias blind you. The crowd was quiet, some nodding. Mrs. Thompson, now appointed to oversee the court's transparency program, sat in the front row taking notes. James Wilson, leading training for court bailiffs, added, "We're the eyes and ears here. If we see injustice, we speak up." Hargrove watched them, knowing he was making amends, a small but necessary step. Karoline hung the $500 fine receipt in a glass frame on her White House office wall. It wasn't just a memento. It was a reminder of one person's power to stand up. Trump walked in, clapping her shoulder. "You're a star, Karoline. The religious freedom crowd loves you, and so do I." He laughed heartily, voice booming. "We just won big. Keep the momentum going. Ta. She nodded, prepping for her next speech at a conservative event in Virginia, where thousands waited to hear the White House's legal genius. The incident's impact stretched beyond D.C. States like Texas, Florida, and Ohio began reviewing their own court rules. Texas's governor tweeted, "Thanks to Karoline Leavitt for reminding us about religious freedom. Texas will follow." A group of Florida lawyers filed for similar training, citing cross in court. On X, people posted photos wearing crosses, Islamic badges, or Buddhist bracelets, captioned, "My freedom, no one can ban it." Karoline read these posts, pride swelling. She hadn't expected one courtroom moment to ignite such a movement. The next day, Karoline stood on a stage in Virginia before a crowd of 5,000 waving religious freedom banners. The camera flashes popping, the cross gleaming on her neck.
She nodded, glancing at Tom, who smiled at her. "Thanks for being here today, Tom," she said, then turned back to Blake. "So, how's it feel working with these people? Is it what you thought?" Blake paused, eyes dropping to the floor, then sighed. "No," he admitted. "I used to think MAGA was all showy, clueless types, but after a few weeks here meeting people like Tom, I was wrong. They're not the enemy I imagined." Karoline crossed her arms, her gaze sharp but not harsh. "You were wrong to judge me by my politics, Blake. You called my money dirty, kicked me out of the dealership because I'm with Trump. But a person's worth isn't in their politics. It's in how they treat others." Blake nodded slowly, his voice quieter. "I know. I apologized to Mr. Rio when the car was delivered. But now I want to say it to you directly. I was wrong, Miss Leavitt. There's no excuse for how I treated you." She smiled faintly, for once without a trace of sarcasm. "No need for excuses, just that you've learned something. That's enough," Tom chimed in, cheerful. "Blake's not bad, Miss Leavitt. He helped me shoot hoops yesterday. Still pretty clumsy, though." Blake laughed, his first since arriving at the gala, his eyes brightening. "I'm learning, Tom. You're a tough coach." Nicholas Rio emerged from behind, tall in a black suit, hands casually in his pockets. He placed a hand on Karoline's shoulder, looking at Blake with eyes no longer as cold as they'd been at the dealership. "Seeing him work here, I've got to admit, he's trying," he said to his wife, then turned to Blake. "So, is this gala what you thought MAGA was about?" Blake shook his head. "No, sir. I thought it'd be all flash. But now I see it's about community. About people like Tom." Nicholas nodded, his voice deep. "Good. I had nothing once, Blake, slept on the streets penniless. But I learned worth isn't in looks or beliefs, it's in actions. You were wrong to disrespect Karoline, but you're making it." "Right. I respect that." He paused, then added, "My company needs some new cars. If you keep changing, I'll let you handle that deal." Blake blinked, stunned. "You serious, Mr. Rio?" Nicholas smirked. "I don't joke about business, but it's up to you." Karoline cut in. "The Azure's serving me well. Delivered on time, no issues. But next time, don't let politics get in the way of your job." Blake nodded, his voice earnest. "I won't. Thank you, Miss Leavitt and Mr. Rio." The gala rolled on with laughter and music. Blake wheeled Tom back to the buffet, his demeanor noticeably softer. Karoline and Nicholas lingered, watching. "Think he's really changed?" she asked. Nicholas chuckled. "Maybe, but if not, I'll make him remember. You're the most important thing to me." She leaned into him, smiling. "I know." The story of Karoline Leavitt and Nicholas Rio at Capital Luxury Motors deeply reflects the political and social polarization in the U.S. today, where personal beliefs often clash with community values. In the 2025 setting, Karoline, White House press secretary, was denied the Azure Coupe by Blake Thompson simply for being MAGA, a conservative symbol he despised. This incident echoes current realities where private businesses like coffee shops or restaurants sometimes refuse service over political stances, sparking debates about free speech and private property rights. Blake represents a segment of progressive Americans who see themselves as superior, yet fall into the very intolerance they critique in others. Conversely, Karoline and Nicholas embody the resilience of conservatives, refusing to bow to bias and using action, the fiery red Rolls-Royce and the MAGA gala, to prove their worth. The lesson here isn't just don't judge a book by its cover, but a more specific call in today's America. Learn to listen and respect, rather than letting politics cloud judgment. Blake changed after working with veteran Tom at the gala, realizing human value transcends labels like MAGA or progressive. Nicholas didn't destroy Blake but gave him a chance to make amends, like offering the car deal. You can too. When facing conflict, choose dialogue over confrontation and let actions affirm your worth, like Karoline driving the Azure through. DC, remember, polarization doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. If you enjoyed the story of how Karoline and Nicholas taught Blake a lesson about respect beyond politics, hit subscribe so you don't miss more inspiring tales like this. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with another MAGA journey.